Thanks for coming. This will be about pull request review and some best practices that we do at Jobico, but which are a good idea in general. My name is Klausi Pura. I work as head of technology operations at Jobico. I've been in this company for a very long time, coming originally from the Drupal community, been working with Drupal for a very long time. Also interested in information security and security in general. As a fun fact, I just reported a security issue to another Russmedia company yesterday. So if you see me going through your sites, testing a couple of things, yeah, this might be me. I specialize in code reviews. I've been reviewing code for a very long time. Also did it in a Drupal community for new contributors and told them what they should actually do or how they should fix their code. But I'm also quite familiar with web services like REST and GraphQL that we use for the next version of our software. Have a little bit of a system admin background, but I'm not doing that anymore. And in general now responsible for system architecture and performance at Jobico. So let's jump right in. Why do we even do peer review? So first of all, I think there are multiple terms that people use for reviewing code. There's code review, there's peer review, there's pull request review. So usually it happens when a developer makes a change to the code base that the source code is reviewed, and this is done by a human. So I'm not talking about automated scans or linting or anything. Those are all good things, but I'm talking about manual code review by another peer developer here. So what do we check the source code for? My most favorite topic is security vulnerabilities. So when we write new features, when we fix bugs, when we make optimizations, we need to make sure that our software is secure, especially in the web development world. There are a couple of attack vectors that we should think about when we write code. And yeah, this is actually hard to catch by anything else than peer review. You actually need to know what you're doing. It's even hard to test for this for yourself. We also want to follow implementation best practices. So one thing that we develop in the software should be the same if we develop it in another place, so that we follow similar patterns, so that the next developer looking at the code can immediately see what the code is doing, what it should be doing, and how it is done in another place, and then compare that. We also want to find regressions, and we want to find if this code change that we are introducing interferes with other components. So of course, we have multiple components in a system. Now the developer makes a new feature, but this might actually break something else. And if we are lucky, we catch this with the tests, but tests cannot cover everything. So that's also good if a human that knows more about the system can review and point out any defects that might happen. There are actually multiple topics that we can cover in source code review that are not really implementation specific, what you're trying to accomplish, but those are broad topics. Like I already mentioned security, but there's also performance and accessibility. We want to make sure that the code we write is usable. We want to make sure that the code is well documented and there are comments. So this helps a little bit to write spaghetti code, which would be actually completely fine for an automated test. But if a human looks at it, it should be actually readable, it should be commented, it should be easy to understand so that somebody else can pick it up and work further with that code. And I think my summary of that is that we want to confirm the approach taken by the developer. The developer submits a pull request, we review it, and we want to come to the conclusion, yes, this is the right approach. Yes, what we are doing here is good. And yes, this is what we want to do. So some people might say, but we have tests, right? So tests are there for quality assurance, and we want to make sure that our software works by writing tests. But this is not an either or. So tests are not a replacement for peer review, but also peer review is not a replacement for tests. This means you should actually do both. And as peer review is part of software engineering, so are other parts of software engineering that complement each other. In the beginning, we actually need to know what we are doing. And often people call this requirements engineering, where we try to find out what does the customer want, what do we want to accomplish here. We need to write down a specification. We need to be on the same page what we're actually trying to do, because otherwise we will build something which is not doing that, what it should do. And then all of our testing and all of our review doesn't really help us if we build the wrong thing. Then, of course, I think it's important to do manual testing. So when a developer writes code, I think it's very important that they check their own code, that it's actually working, that they run it themselves, that they understand it. not blindly editing files on GitHub and then committing them directly to the master branch without ever running the code. I think that's not good. So manual testing is also important. Of course, we have automated testing. I think this is a big topic and very important to prevent regressions in your code. That's next time you make another change that something breaks. Yeah, this is very important. And I already touched a little bit on documentation on comments. Those are important as well. So when you make a change, document it in your system documentation, in your design documents, comment it also in code. So I'm not a fan of self-explanatory code because I think there is no such thing. Of course, I can read the code and understand what it does, but I never can see why it does something. And that's very important to have comments in places where you do stuff. Yeah, and in the middle of those, or in addition to those, we also do code review to catch some things. So let's look a little bit what authors can do when they submit a pull request, for example, on GitHub, which we use on Jobico, but this also applies to GitLab or any other code review tool. First of all, I think it's important to have a good title. The title should mention if this is a feature, a bug fix, and what we're trying to do in one sentence. Then, of course, it's also nice to have a good description. It should have a link to your project management tool, for example, to Jira or teamwork.com or whatever you are using, so that the pull request doesn't stand on its own, but it's connected to your project management team or to the client, whatever you need to work efficiently. Because sometimes it's important for a reviewer to look up what are the requirements for the pull request. I want to read up on that, and then it's good to have the links there. Pull requests can have different states. So when a pull request is not ready, then it should be a draft pull request, or it should have some special tag. So before GitHub had draft pull request, we used the tag do not merge. Then it was pretty clear that this is a work in progress pull request and not ready yet. And we have the policy at Jobico that we try to push code every day before we go home. So we work something during the day. You should not leave the commits or the changes that you made on your local disk, but you should always push it to GitHub in a pull request, even if it is not ready. This is good for tracking progress. This is also good for your mental health, so that you know, I actually accomplished something on this day and I actually pushed this and it's there. Then the other state would be that something is ready. Then we also tag it for ready for review. This is an additional signal on GitHub for us in the overview of our pull request that we know this pull request is ready for somebody to be looked at. And what we also try to do is assign exactly one reviewer. I think it is confusing if there are multiple reviewers assigned to a pull request, because then it's not clear who will look at it first, or are they looking at it at the same time? There might be a human race condition where two reviewers are actually pointing out the same problems in a code. So I'm a big fan of having exactly one reviewer assigned, then it's completely clear who should look at it next. A good trick for authors, developers that write the pull request, they should do a self-review. So they pushed up the changes to the version control system to GitHub. Then they can use the files change tab, same as reviewers does, and do a self-review. Are the files that are there actually correct? Maybe I missed to add a file to Git and forgot to push it. So is it really complete? With the self-review, you can already find a lot of problems that a reviewer would point out. And it's also better for the reviewer that they don't need to tell you that something obvious is not correct. And what we also have as a signal on GitHub are the automated tests from the continuous integration green. So this is also very helpful for authors. If they didn't run the tests themselves locally, they can check with the green check mark on GitHub if everything passed correctly and there is no regression from the automated tests. So it's also good to rely on that. So let's look at an example. Here's a pull request from Roman that he submitted a couple of days ago. First, if you look at the title, I think there's already a good title. It says feed, which means it's a feature. So we use the Angular commit message standards. We also use them for pull requests. Then we know in which component this change is being made. It's the feeds module that is part of our code base. And it has a description what we are doing here. Roman also wrote a nice description. He left a link to a task to our project managers system. He also left a link to Drupal.org, so where other people have been working on a similar approach, so I can also check that. He explained what I should do. He said, please check if we can make a new patch for this. So he's trying to improve a contributed Drupal module, and he's asking me if we can make a new patch as it is right now. So it has all links. It has clear instructions what to do. Very good. Thank you, Roman. It has exactly one reviewer assigned. It's me, Klausi. The yellow dot on the side says that I didn't review it yet, so then I can either approve or request changes. So I still need to do that. And Roman assigned it to himself so that everybody knows who is currently working on a pull request. As I said, we have this label ready for review here, which is just an additional helper for us to quickly see how many pull requests are still needed for review. And yeah, it's good for overview of pull requests. Now let's take a little look at the reviewer side for pull requests. The most important thing when you review something is to leave inline review comments. So if you have a very specific comment, what should be improved, it should be on the exact line where it occurs. So on GitHub, you can leave comments on exact lines of changed files. And then when Roman fixes it, the comment is auto-hidden. So GitHub supports you in that workflow that when something is fixed, the comment is already marked as resolved. I think that is very helpful and saves a lot of time. I tend to point out all the things that I see. So even if I see minor coding standard issues, or if I see, I don't know, some code style that should be improved, I will point out everything. But I always emphasize that this is a minor issue and the pull request shouldn't be blocked on such minor issues. I try to avoid playing pull request ping pong, where somebody writes a pull request and then a reviewer looks at it and has changes. So the author needs to change them, then they look again, and then they have to change it again. So it goes from the author to the reviewer and back and forth. I'm not a big fan of that because I think this also costs a lot of time. So I think it's important to trust your developers and just confirm that their approach is correct, but they are responsible that the code actually works and is correct. At least in our sector, we don't build highly critical software. We are in the website business. We build job boards. It is important that they work. I'm aware of that, but they are not military-grade atomic reactors that have to function all the time. So I can trust my developers that they know what they are doing. I give them one review. If I only find minor issues, I approve the pull request. So I confirm with them the approach makes sense, no major issues. They fix the little things, they can merge themselves, they can deploy themselves. Or I can request changes, and this is for security issues, other major problems that we find. If the approach is not correct, that we should do something else, then this is reserved for that. So let's look at a couple of bad examples. This is what I don't like about pull request when there is a wall of review text. So Klausi, he did a very long review here. I'm not really liking that. So the good thing is he commented on the line, but yeah, he left really this huge text, and now the reviewer the author has to deal with it. Should he write a long comment back? Should they discuss on the pull request? Is this really the right medium? So what I propose before you write so long comments in pull request, I would discuss this on a one-to-one call instead. I think there's a difference between open source projects and internal projects for companies, but at least for internal projects for companies, I think it's much better to discuss this on a call in a synchronous communication medium, that you figure this out. So to avoid talking past each other. I know this is not possible for open source projects because they only work asynchronously most of the time. So that's why you see on public projects huge comments lists and everybody gets a headache from that. So I think that's not really good. Instead of dumping this into a pull request, maybe this text should go into a design document. It might also be a sign that this pull request has been opened too early, so it's not clear that the approach is really correct. Maybe it should be discussed what should actually be done. This can happen if you solve complex problems, if you implement complex features, then a pull request can quickly get out of hand, and then I really recommend to choose another medium to discuss this with project managers, call a meeting, yeah, whatever. What is also important is communication and tone. I think this cannot be emphasized enough. I think this has to be repeated for every new developer that starts in a company. Be friendly. This is an asynchronous medium. You don't look each other in the eye, so people take criticism very personally. It might affect them. They might lose self-esteem, whatever. So it's important to always be constructive, explaining why something should be improved, but also how something can be improved. So being constructive also has these two facets of point out what is wrong, but also point out what we can do about it, what the developer can do about it, or finding a solution together. Then I think it motivates them already to be in a good mood. I think it's also important to give people recognition for the work. So thank them, use happy emojis, tell them if they do good work, because that I think that is a good feedback enforcing good work that they are doing so that they can do good work in the future. And criticism can be taken personally, especially by newbies. Imagine that a new developer starts at your companies, and probably the first pull request that they are sending, it will have some problems. So it is almost certain that on a first pull request, a new developer will make a couple of mistakes. So you have to point them out. Make sure that you don't do it on a personal level. Try to stay objective. Try to give them a perspective how they can solve it. And then I think all is good. So let's look at a bad example here. Something insulting and unconstructive. Klausi reviewed this pull request, but he was writing, "This is literally the worst line of code I have ever read." And he added the rolling eyes emoji. Yeah, what do you think about that? I'm not really happy with this comment. So there's actually one good thing about this comment. He commented on the line, on the exact line. So he didn't just dump this as a general comment on the pull request. He actually said, this line is really, really bad. Okay, at least there's some feedback. I know that something is wrong with this line. But Klausi here is really leaving out a couple of important details. Why is it the worst line he has ever read? What could we do instead? And would you roll your eyes in a face-to-face meeting with the developer? If you, let's imagine you sit side by side in front of the computer and you review the pull request together, and you tell them, well, this line is not good. Would you look them in the eye and then roll your eyes? I don't think so. So be careful what kind of negative emojis you use. I think positive emojis are not a problem. Yeah. I think we have to be careful. Maybe Klausi meant this in a funny way. So this can also be a problem. Don't try to be funny in pull requests, except if the humor is really obvious. But if something is wrong in a pull request and they need to provide feedback, then that shouldn't be a joke, because people can take a joke in a very wrong way in such examples. So let's look at a good example instead. What is clear and constructive? So Klaus is pointing out that there is a security issue. Actually, and the code on top is just an example. There is no security issue. Sorry for the confusion. I just briefly threw together this example. So Klaus is saying there's a security issue because we're printing directly to HTML. We forgot to sanitize the variable that is user provided. Okay, so that's the problem. But Klaus is also saying what we can do instead. Please sanitize the variable, use this and this function. This is what we should do instead. He also provided helpful docs for the developer where they can read up more information about preventing security issues. So this is also very good. And in the end, he's also doing a very nice trick. He's saying, this is the only blocker for this pull request. I don't see other problems. And once you resolve this, we can merge. So he's giving the author a perspective. He's saying, you did something very wrong here, and I think it's not good, and we should fix it in a certain way. But if you resolve this and if you educate yourself, I think there's no problem. We can go ahead, we can merge, we can deploy. Yep. So I'm a big fan of encouraging always a positive perspective so that people have the feeling they can finish something and that they are not thrown back into the Stone Age with a pull request that they can start all over again and are not motivated anymore. All right, that's almost already it. A little bit of summary, benefits of code review. What do we actually get out of it? I think we get an increased code quality. So if more eyes look at the piece of code, then we can also increase the code quality. There's this famous quote from Linus Torvalds that he said, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, which means if enough people look at the code, then they will find the bugs and they can actually make it better. And I think that's true. Don't underestimate the aspect of education and knowledge transfer. So when you review the code of somebody, they will learn something by it. You, as a reviewer, you might also learn something because you see what approaches other people taking. And this means that code review should not only be done by senior developer. There's a reason why it's called peer review. It should be done by your peers. And a peer is everybody in your development team. Of course, the more difficult topics should be reviewed by senior developers. Or if a reviewer doesn't know a component very well, they can call in another senior reviewer to take a look. But in the end, it should be an equal playing field so that the reviewer can learn something and also the author of the pull request can learn something, how to improve stuff. It's also important to think about standardization, so that nobody works on their own in their own house, so that everybody implements the same things in the same way, so that they can be compared, so that they can be improved together, so that when another developer looks at it, they immediately know how it works because they have seen this before. And for new developers, I think it's also very important to check what they have actually been working on. When a new developer starts in your company, you have to check their work anyway. You need to make sure that they have all the resources and know their way around in the system. And the pull request review is the perfect opportunity to teach them how they should write code. For new developers, I recommend to do a synchronous pull request review. So you actually have a call together and you look through the code. You just tell them what you are seeing. I saw you implemented this hook. You implemented this service. Very good. I would move this bracket further down. Then it's in line with our coding standards we do elsewhere. And then I think it's not a bad experience if they get an automated email with 10 comments in it. Especially for new developers, I think we have to be careful to make it a good experience for them. All right, and that's it already. That's all the points that I have. It should